Hey folks, we're about to start another episode of Ask Us Anything about electrochemistry. But before we begin, because we have some extra time, there are a few things I'd like to go over first. While we're waiting for the live stream to start, type your question into the chat. The sooner we get your question, the sooner we'll be able to answer it when the live stream starts. We usually try to answer questions in the order that we receive them, but it's definitely possible that we get so many questions that when your question comes up, we're out of time. If you are a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 YouTube member, you do get priority in us answering your question. You also have the opportunity to join us on the stream to either share slides or talk to us in person about your specific electrochemistry research questions. If you are a Tier 1 or Tier 2 member on our YouTube channel, you will find in the community post the link and password to join us on our broadcasting platform. We get a lot of questions about electrochemistry, whether it's through our YouTube comments, webinars, email, phone conversations. We get lots of questions from people about electrochemistry. And sometimes responding to a YouTube comment or trying to describe a cyclic voltammogram over the phone isn't always the easiest way to teach or describe electrochemistry. That's why we created this live stream. In the Ask Us Anything About Electrochemistry live stream, you can ask us any questions you have about electrochemistry, and we can use better tools and take more time to describe some of these electrochemical processes to help you with your research and understanding of electrochemistry. Now, in our time of doing this live stream, we've observed that if you ask a very, very specific question, we might not be able to answer it. It'll be a little bit too specific for us. On the other side, if you ask a very broad question and you're interested in just a very broad understanding of cyclic voltammetry, we have separate tools, we have other resources to help you. So we do have a YouTube video on cyclic voltammetry, an introduction to the subject. And if you're interested in more of a long-form course on, say, electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, we have a 5-part EIS webinar series for our Tier 2 YouTube members that you can access at any time. Now, if you weren't aware, Pine Research Instrumentation is a company that produces a wide array of high-quality electrochemical research equipment, from potentiostats to electrodes, electrochemical rotators, cells, different types of accessories. Pine Research has been supporting electrochemistry research and teaching for decades. Recently, we have developed new electrochemical simulation software called Aftermath Live. Aftermath Live is an online streaming platform where you can simulate popular electrochemical techniques like cyclic voltammetry. It's a powerful research tool, as you might simulate a cyclic voltammogram to support an electrochemical mechanism for your redox reaction that you're studying. But Aftermath Live and cyclic voltammetry simulation is also a very powerful tool when it comes to just learning electrochemistry. In fact, in previous episodes of the live stream, we have used Aftermath Live and our simulation software to answer some of the questions that you have. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can get a 10% discount on your first month of the basic and research editions of Aftermath Live by using the coupon code PINEYouTube10 when you're at checkout. Aftermath Live is a powerful tool and you can cancel your subscription at any time. Go to aftermathlive.com to check it out. Link is in the description below. Our live streams are normally on Fridays from 1 to 3 p.m. They normally last about 2 hours, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. If you miss the live stream, you'll always be able to watch it on our YouTube channel, and in the description we put timestamps for every question that was asked. This way you can look through the description and find the questions that are most relevant to your research and then watch those at your leisure. Also, we apologize in advance if we mispronounce your name. If on a YouTube channel you can put anything you want as a name. It could be a Pokemon, it could be a string of numbers. But if we call you out and we accidentally mispronounce your name, we apologize in advance. Lastly, please do not spam the chat. We've had numerous instances of people either talking about inappropriate things or constantly filling the chat up with some kind of spam. We will remove you if you do that. Let's keep the chat very clean and just talk about electrochemistry. Sometimes it takes a while before we're able to answer your question. So if you keep typing your question into the chat and spam the chat, then we will remove you from the chat. But if it's been a while and we may have forgotten about your question, one message as a gentle reminder is all that's required. All right, I think that's all of the housekeeping things. Now, let's start the live stream. All right.
Welcome, everybody.
Hello, everybody, and welcome.
I have only one thing to say to you.
Mm-hmm.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. That's right. It's still...
It's before what we made the ruling. It's February 28th.
Yeah, that's right.
Or 29th. But it's 2026. There's no leap year. So Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It's going to get old very fast.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're
it already feels old.
It does. But the point is, when you're someone like me who really appreciates terrible, lame jokes beat into the ground, you have to go with it. That's it. Yeah. And I'm going to keep going with it. So Happy New Year. Yes. Welcome, everybody.
Yep. It's I guess it's the second week of the new year.
Yes.
I think. And
well, it's the yeah, that's right.
Or end of this, kind of, yeah.
It's our second week, which means it's everyone's because we're the only thing that matters.
That's right.
Did I say that out loud? I didn't mean to say that out loud.
Relative context of things. Yeah. If your year starts with Ask Us Anything about electrochemistry, and that's week 0, then technically this is the
end of the first week. What else would you start your year with? Like, what's more important than this live stream?
I don't know. I don't know what they're talking about.
Like, in the world. I might be narrow-minded here, but I don't know anything that's more important. Not my family, not anything.
Not even astrological things, seasons.
Like that comet, did you hear? There was this comet that was flying. I don't know if it's by yet or it was coming by that they thought was an alien.
No, I didn't hear about
I'm getting way off topic here, but there was this comet that was like flying by and it was moving at a speed that they, astronomers or someone weren't sure how. And so people were theorizing that it was like an alien or from another galaxy or some crazy thing. This fascinates me, but not in a way that I look into it more than anyone else, which you can tell because I know almost nothing about it. But it was cool because it might be an alien.
You quoted the beginning of Independence Day. It's like, right. There's a comet coming super close.
Look, the point is
slowing down.
When the aliens land, you can't say I didn't warn you.
That's true.
But regardless of whether it's an alien or just a rock flying through the cosmos, it's not more important. It's not more important than this live stream.
That's right.
So that's the takeaway of this intro. It's very important. It looks like Naveed has asked sort of a general question. What is electricity? Electricity is the flow of electrons.
Yeah. That's it.
I don't know what else to say about it. This is an electrochemistry podcast. So electrochemistry, in a very, very like surface level definition would be the intersection of chemistry and electricity. So using chemistry to make said electrons move. So if you have more questions about electrochemistry, then please feel free to ask them.
Yeah.
We're actually not electrician. I'm not an electrician or an electrical engineer. So if you actually do for real have questions about circuits outside of the impedance circuit fitting world or what have you, I'm not going to be of tremendous use.
But there are aspects of electricity that are related to electrochemistry. So we can of course talk more about that as needed.
Yes.
So Cricket Scientific actually reached out to me on LinkedIn to follow up on a question from last week, which, as we all know, was the start of the new year.
That's right.
And this was all about, we had talked about thermoneutral potential, what that is. And he sent me a very interesting paper about it. And it sounds like he's got a little bit of time. I sent him a long document about like what, I had to think about it a bit. I had to think about like, what exactly is it? And so he has a little bit of time, and so I appreciate you sticking by, and hopefully people can see. Yes, they can see the screen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my understanding of thermoneutral potential, especially in the context of OER and even just electrochemistry in general. So as a small recap, the OER reaction, oxygen, oops, not a good start.
Good start.
A good start. OER, oxygen evolution reaction, is part of fuel cells, water electrolysis, and we always say that this is it's at 2.3 volts, and that 2.3 volts is
1.2.
1.23 volts. Sorry, 1.23 volts. Thank you. Is related to the delta G, and in a separate article, someone was suggesting using 1.48 volts as and because this would just take way too long if I didn't type it. This would be the thermo neutral.
Doesn't your brain want to
potential.
say thermonuclear?
I
Like
know,
like
or
thermonuclear.
thermoelectric, or thermo.
Yeah.
It's like thermoneutral potential, and this is based on delta H. This is basically this relates to delta H, the enthalpy of the system. And so the author of this paper was making an argument that we shouldn't be basing our experiments on OER. We should really base on delta G, the 1.23. We should base it on the 1.48 based on the enthalpy. So the question is, why? Why do we do this? Because in the literature, we will often say, oh, I had a 100 millivolt overpotential. Sometimes we use eta for overpotential based on this number. But we shouldn't do that. We should base the overpotential on this number. And so we talked a little bit yesterday, this is a lot of review, but again, remember delta G is equal to delta H minus, oops, make it clearer. I really wish I had a better writing tool.
I'm just jealous that the undo works for you and it doesn't work for me.
I know that's a very
it's like I'm totally handicapped by it. Anyway, proceed.
So the main difference between these two is this factor here, the entropy. And we ask questions about like, well, what exactly is entropy? Entropy is a very complicated subject. It's probably one of the most misunderstood subjects, and we even had some other questions about that the energy is what's called the reversible energy, or Q rev over T, the temperature, is equal to the entropy delta S. And so this quantity is an energy at the end of the day. Delta H is an energy, delta G is an energy. And so when the thinking behind this, because delta G is related to potential, the standard potential, why don't we use delta G versus delta H or delta S to describe energies? And really, what exactly is this Q rev, this energy? And we learn a lot about Gibbs free energy in the context of thermodynamics with like heat engines, mechanical motion, stuff like that. And entropy we describe as randomness, the number of increased states in a system. And in electrochemistry, what we're really talking about ultimately is the conversion of electrical energy to chemical energy, or chemical energy to electrical energy. That's it. Just those two things. Now, interestingly enough, if you read into entropy, if you read into this part of the equation, the entropy has always been described as kind of useless work. It's work that you can't access. It's when you heat a piston up to make it do mechanical energy, you necessarily heat up, say, the sides of the wall or the vessel. You add energy into the system that that you can't get back. And it's always defined in a weird way because this Q rev is defined as an infinitesimally small change that's reversible, so it can go back and forth, which is hard to understand. But basically, this is the energy you can't access. This energy is inaccessible. You can't use it. Inaccessible. And it's an energy penalty in many ways. So in the article, by using this 1.48 voltage, we take into account necessarily the energy penalty that is thermodynamically bound to the OER reaction. And what that reaction is, specifically from the paper, is that in the oxygen evolution reaction, it's a sum of many different reactions, but there is a reaction that involves the conversion of liquid water to and from gas phase water. And this is not an electrochemical step, but it is it's not an electrochemical step, it's a chemical step that has a huge energy associated with entropy. His argument is that this equation is part of the overall reaction, but it's not considered, and it has to happen. So when you think about using a fuel cell, you start with, say, gas phase hydrogen and gas phase oxygen, and when you perform those reactions to convert oxidize the hydrogen, reduce the oxygen, you form you form gas phase water, but that ultimately turns into liquid water. That's useless energy. There's a change in heat that occurs when that happens. So that process there's an energy cost that we know about very well thermally, but we never think about it electrochemically. But it does manifest itself in the final potential. So that's his argument. One of his big arguments is about this reaction playing a role, and that fundamentally you must take into account the thermoneutral potential to really accurately describe what your overpotential is. It's not this. This is not the available energy, if you will. So that's part of it. And then what I later talked about, and if you're still around, hopefully you're kind of still around listening. Then the question is, well, this makes it very interesting, because I'm like, okay, well, electrochemically, I'm always like, well, potential and Gibbs free energy. But really, we can now think about potential in terms of a delta H component and an entropic component, minus T delta S. So there's like potentials. There's potentials that are associated with these. Specifically, there are things like overpotentials. And I'm like, okay, the OER is a very complicated reaction. A lot of people are studying it, many steps depending on the catalyst you're using. But can this equation, can we think about the energy, the potential of an electrochemical reaction being related to the enthalpy and related to the entropy? Is there, in a way, a potential associated with entropy and enthalpy? And I think even for simple reactions, I don't need to use ox and red, we'll just use A and B. For something like A plus an electron going to B, does this still hold? And my argument is yes. The argument is that when you have things, or let's make it even more kind of realistic. Let's say we have iron 3 plus iron 2 plus. Oh, sorry, not plus iron 2 plus an electron to create iron 2 plus. So actually, I'm gonna do a little trick here. Boom. And plus an electron. It goes to iron 2 plus. The entropy change between iron 3 plus and iron 2 plus is typically pretty small. It's definitely smaller than the entropy change associated with the oxygen evolution reaction, right? But I think there is still an entropy component to this reaction that creates an overpotential necessarily. So, and I think the last thing that I mentioned in my LinkedIn message to you was that we can think about the the Nernst equation sort of say that the potential is equal to E naught minus RT over NF times the log, natural log, of the activities of B over A, or iron 2 plus over iron 3 plus. And that when we apply a potential, when we change this potential, we're shifting this ratio. And when we shift this ratio, when we go to a state of having 50-50 to something like, 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 in A to B or B to A, there's a necessary entropic cost to that. In a way, you have a higher, you have more entropy when you have 50-50 mix, a 1-to-1 ratio of A and B, or iron 2 plus iron 3 plus. But when you move away from the Gibbs free energy, from this is related to delta G, to delta G, when you move away from it in any direction and change that ratio, you're making the system, quote, more ordered. You're going from 2 species more to more like 1 species. And this has a 59 millivolt, I don't want to call it penalty, but penalty. You must go beyond the thermodynamic potential to drive the product ratio, the ratio of these 2 species, by some amount. So, and so that's another level of thinking of this. And it's like, oh, well, these don't change that much. It's, this is pure Nernstian. That's a way to think about overpotential. And the last point that I made, which I think is something people should take a look at, is that if you've watched my voltammetry series webinar, I talk about Marcus theory. And so Marcus theory is a theory of electron transfer. And one of the main points of Marcus theory, to kind of make it short, is that when we go from something like iron 3 plus to plus an electron to iron 2 plus, the kinetic barrier associated with, say, Butler-Volmer, the heterogeneous rate constant, is based on things like bond distortion and the transition state. So when there's a transition state between these 2 species, that's when the electron transfer occurs. Transition state. And I'm spelling things really bad and drawing badly, but there's a transition state that creates bond distortion. And that bond distortion, when you think about bond distortion in a molecule, that's entropic. You need to go, you're allowing the molecule to be in more energy states, right? It's got more energy states. It has higher entropy. You have to pay that energy, to create these bond distortions to get the molecule past the overpotential. And I would encourage you to look at, so I'm going to share CV simulation very quickly, but this is an experiment that I want people to look at and try, which is, if you're doing simulation, you have Aftermath Live, even for a simple 1 electron transfer reaction. Okay, so I simulate it. This is just A plus an electron goes to B, reduction reaction here, right? The potential centered around 0. If I make this, the heterogeneous rate constant, very low, let's make it super slow, I have an overpotential. I've now shifted the potential where this reaction occurs. So if we can relate, we can basically relate the slow rate constant to more energy for a bond distortion, which creates an overpotential, which can be related to the entropy of the system. So systems that have bigger bond distortions, more entropy, that's the potential payment you have to make to drive the reaction forward. So this is a way of thinking about the thermoneutral potential and even thinking about electrochemistry in a slightly different way to basically to relate that the Gibbs free energy and the Gibbs free energy, the entropy and enthalpy to electrochemical processes. So that's kind of my I had to think a lot about this and while reading the paper. So I know you don't have a lot of time, Cricket Scientific, but hopefully that was it's kind of a follow up on my explanation for thermoneutral potential.
I think the coolest thing about that is that mostly at the end there, you really showed the connection between entropy and kinetics. That the payment, that the payment due to the increased, bond distortion, the number of states, leads to the potential difference.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we get questions like in this live stream and just as a general course of action, where it's like relating thermodynamics to kinetics or to the electrochemistry in general. And this is a good way to think about it, just in terms of like, there's a connection between the entropy, which is thermodynamics, to the potential from, by the way, the Nernst equation.
The Nernst equation.
We couldn't escape January without the Nernst equation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And just the potential payment that that the reason why the potential grows, essentially. They're all kind of related. I like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I had one other thing I was going to say and I forget what it was. So we'll just move on. Can't remember. I was going to say something about, oh my God. Anyway, let's move on.
Was it EIS or?
No, it was something about, it wasn't even meant to be, it wasn't even a joke. Like it wasn't even snarky, which I'm very common to do, maybe it was about the Nernst equation. Maybe it was just a stupid comment. So let's move on. Arnab says, what's the difference between EMF and cell potential? Those are basically the same thing. This is EMF, electromotive force, is like outdated is not the right word. People still use this term, but it's a bit of an archaic term. It's basically just its potential. So they are basically interchangeable for all practical purposes. Let me see here. Oh, that was Siva before. So Dr. Rajiv Kumar from LinkedIn has joined us. I know that the question is truncated for you on the screen, but I'll read it. There's only a few more words anyway. And he says, a lot of literature use nickel foam as the substrate, which itself shows significant current and lower overpotential compared to glassy carbon or Toray paper. This is true. In your opinion, what's the proper way to report HER and OER values? And then also, is IR correction really necessary in reporting the values? So to the first part of your question, it's a great question. I think the reason this is done is well, there's a few of them. One of them is that nickel tends to be really good in alkaline systems, so some people prefer to use it in alkaline systems. Foam gives you higher surface area, so that helps in some ways compared to graphite, where Toray paper, carbon paper, I think carbon can be made kind of into a foam, but it's not, it's more brittle. It's not as, so people like nickel foam because it's a little more stable, like physically, it's a little bit easier to use, I think. So these are some of the reasons why people use it, but you're exactly right that nickel, it's not the best OER and HER electrocatalyst, but it's definitely better than carbon. And so to your point, there's I would sort of be a bit reductive here, and I don't mean in an electrochemical way. I mean like in a logical way. I would propose two solutions, and certainly discussion you could have a discussion about other possibilities here. The first, as far as how do you report OER and HER, the first is that you use if you're using nickel foam as the substrate, and you're coating it with something, platinum or ruthenium or whatever you're coating it with, is to use a material on the nickel foam that is like at least an order of magnitude better catalyst for OER and HER. This is also one of the things about carbon, right? I mean, like you can put platinum on carbon and do OER and HER, and like nobody subtracts the carbon baseline, because it's mostly irrelevant, right? Like its overpotential is like hundreds of millivolts worse for every reaction. But you could make the argument, if you wanted to be a purist in some sense, that like even platinum on carbon, like at some overpotential, your current is whatever. You could like subtract a couple of femtoamps from that, like to say, well, I'm subtracting the contribution from the graphite because it technically is doing some OER or HER or whatever, right? The carbon's going to contribute a little bit, but it's so negligible compared to the activity of the platinum or the palladium or whatever you're using. So that's the first answer, is that use something that dwarfs the activity of the nickel, so you can just so even though the nickel is participating, pick something with a much better overpotential, like smaller overpotential, and a much greater activity, such that you can effectively neglect the contribution of the nickel itself. Right now, if that isn't possible, and it may not be, because nickel, like I said, it's not the best, but it's not insignificant in terms of it will do the OER and the HER and things like that. The other is to make sure, and this is a really difficult one, make sure the nickel is completely covered. Like if you're doing electrode deposition, if you're doing a physical deposition, spray coating, whatever, however you're like covering the nickel foam, right? And this would be done in the either microscopically or elemental analysis of some kind, EDX or something of that nature, to determine that there's no nickel exposed whatsoever. This is really difficult, especially because it's a foam and it has a really high surface area, and all the little nooks and crannies did you really coat everywhere with your catalyst of interest, right? Sometimes dipping it into maybe a viscous solution can kind of work, but it's definitely unsure that you have perfect coverage, right? But if you're able to do that, let's say you run background scans on the nickel foam, and then you run scans with your coated material on the nickel, and you see no trace of the background, you might convince yourself that there's no nickel exposed. And then you would, again, be able to make the argument that there's no contribution from the nickel, either because its contribution to those reactions is negligible compared to your material, or because there's just no nickel exposed and it isn't even part of your electrochemical system. So those are the two things that I would say would help you. But as a general, idea, your comment is very wise, because you're pointing out something that's just true, which is that, not everything can work great as a substrate, because if its intrinsic activity is a little bit too high or good or whatever, well, you don't want it to interfere if you're trying to study the activity of something else, which is why graphite, carbon, glassy carbon, Toray paper, all these things are really great and used a lot, because carbon is electrically conductive. It works great as a catalyst, and it does almost nothing. It's perfect in a lot of cases. It's the fuel cell, electrolyzer, substrate, etc. So that's kind of my answer to that part of your question. To the last part of your question, is IR correction really necessary in reporting the values? In most cases, no. But as a matter of, I don't know what you'd say, form,
accuracy,
what?
form.
Yeah, accuracy. As a matter of form, as a matter of convincing reviewers in a publication that you know what you're doing, most people do IR correction. But I'll be honest, if you have a very high surface area material with like half molar or concentration electrolyte, or even 0.1 molar or something, the amount of IR drop is, although I suppose if the surface area is really high, I take it back.
You could have more.
Yeah. So it's backwards of what I was saying. But needless to say, high concentration electrolyte almost all the time negates too much IR drop. Now, again, to further the point of the high surface area, IR drop, right, stands for IR is current times resistance. So your IR drop will be higher if I or R are large, right? Now, the electrolyte keeps R small, and small distance between working and reference electrodes. And if your system is good, there's not blocked frits and things of that nature. But if you have really like crazy high surface area, current scales with surface area. So it is possible that what I said is incorrect. For instance, if your surface area is really large, the current could be large and your IR drop could be significant, even if R is small. So it is possible in some situations, if your surface area is tremendously large, that yes, it is necessary. But in a lot of situations, and in my own personal research, when I used to do this, I would do IR corrected CVs and things like that, and it was like performative. Like it was like, here, reviewers and people who would ask questions like, well, I don't know if I trust your data because you didn't IR correct it. And it's like, oh, it moves the whole thing like it barely does anything, because there's no IR drop. But when you do it, you can just say you did it. So a lot of that happens in the community, I will tell you. When in doubt, just do IR correction. You can either do it during, if you have a potentiostat that can do IR compensation, or you can correct afterwards. Dr. Kumar, if you have a question about how to do either of those, I'm very happy to show you. Because both can be done. I can show you how to do both or either. But needless to say, I will skip that for now just to move on to other questions. But that's my answer on whether it's necessary or not. Again, most of the time, perhaps not, but probably a good idea to do so. And if you have a really large surface area, it could be necessary, and it's probably better to do IR correction.
Yeah. All right. Before we get, I just want to say, Luke, first off, thank you for the super chat gift. That was very generous of you. We will get to your question. We try to get to questions in the order that we receive them, but we will get to your question very soon. PW3244 asks, hello, I've done EIS for a fuel cell and an impedance of a porous electrode is obvious from the spectra of 45-degree angle at high frequency preceding the Randles semicircle. To continue, the data can be fitted with a classic Randles with pretty low error when high frequency part is limited a bit. This question is if and when such modeling is justified. Using a porous electrode model gives a better fit, but it introduces several new parameters. You want to take this one? Or?
Yeah, this sounds like a classic transmission line. Porous electrode model gives. So if when you say porous electrode model, I assume you're referring to the transmission line. I'm finding a data set. I have a data set. Give me one moment while I find this for you. Let's see, there's one of two places. I'm going to find both and be super prepared for your question. And by that, I mean taking multiple minutes to find it. And then I will be super prepared. But okay, let's see. It's in my advanced fitting one I did with blocking.
But in general, you'd say that if you have a better fit and you also know the system is a porous electrode,
yes,
then if you use a model that's more, you believe, more accurate to the physical system and it fits well, the fact that it has all these extra parameters is just showing you that, oh, the system is more complex and you do need to fit those extra things. It may be annoying, but it'll be more accurate.
That's exactly correct.
Reality.
I could not word it more better than that. It's you're picking a model that scientifically and based on the phenomena are occurring in the morphology of your system matches what's happening, and it has a bunch of parameters, but it fits. Great, right? Now this may not fit yours exactly. You said you had like maybe a Randles thing at the lower frequency, but the situation where you have this kind of 45-degree line at the high frequency, so the left side of the Nyquist plot over here, this is a classic transmission line situation, and this happens with porous electrodes. So I'm going to also do a quick thing here and just share a bit of this webinar that I did a long time ago at this point, but it was on advanced fitting, and I was doing some data on a transmission line specifically. So looking at tortuosity, but I just wanted to show you this diagram because this is just kind of what it is. So in a porous electrode, this is where the transmission line.
You said that looks exactly like my data.
Well, perfect. I'm glad I can speak exactly to your situation here. But what's the name? I'm sorry. What was the person?
Oh, PW.
PW, right.
PW
So apologies if you know all of this, PW, but for maybe the edification of others, this is what the transmission line looks like. It's sort of a semi-infinite sum. The gray here, you can see this is the electrode, like morphologically, it's obviously not always a perfect like rectangles, but it's just a representation. And so within the pore of the electrode, you have resistance through the pore in the electrolyte, resistance possibly through the electrode itself, as well as boundary conditions at the base inside the inner part of the pore, at the outer part of the pore, or the outer part of the electrode nanowire, or whatever the part of you'd call the electrode here, and then the interface within the pore. And the reason for the semi-infinite sum is that the transmission line is intended and specifically designed to capture a distribution of properties within the pore. That's what this does. Now, it's a bit of an odd concept, because when you fit this Y, we call this Y. There's different terminology depending on who you see, whose paper you read. We call this the Y element for whatever it's worth. You get one, for example, if you use an RC or an RQ here, you get one value for the resistor and the capacitor or the CPE. But it's sort of an aggregate, if you will. So to your point, like, well, I have all these parameters. What do they mean? Well, this inner interface here is designed to capture that aggregate average, if you will, sort of interface within the pore that accounts for the fact that it can kind of be somewhat of a distribution. Mathematically, it works this way. I'm not going to show you all the mathematics. It's crazy. And then you have boundary conditions. These can be open, they can be short, they can be resistors, they can be capacitors, they can be a whole lot of things. But the transmission line is really the perfect system for fitting, especially as you said, if that's what your dad looks exactly like. So let me just get to it and kind of talk through it a little bit, which is that in our software, for instance, you can set, so there's common ones called the Bisquer open and Bisquer short. It's named after a brilliant Juan Bisquer scientist who wrote and published a lot about the transmission line. He might have, if not invented it, like popularized it within the electrochemical community. So his name is on these, but our software allows you to change these as needed. Basically, you can see, I'll just kind of fiddle with it a little bit. You can see some of these might not fit perfectly. Yeah, that looks all right. I mean, I could play with the values. But depending on what you do for the boundary conditions, you can change them to, and this is, again, something you might have to play around with yourself or think about based on what you know about your system. Like, oh, well, I know at the boundary of the pore, that's where most of the reactions are happening. So actually this boundary should be like an RC, like that's where the charge transfer process is happening. And actually within the pore, there's just going to be some capacitance. And the X2 is neglected here because the electrode itself is quite conductive. So there's not a lot of resistance within the electrode, but that doesn't have to be the case. You could have a resistor here. And you can play with these, and sometimes the plot will change and look a little different. Words are escaping me at the moment. And so you can always change these and see that looks actually like it fits pretty well. But but this data isn't your data. So the point is exactly what the combination of the transmission line is might vary. Your alternative to this, and I think you might have mentioned it in your question a little bit too, is you used a Randles element or even a Warburg. Sometimes a Warburg short can be used to entertain this kind of data and fit it. But the honestly, and based on your comment, it looks like that. I think that the transmission line is probably your best bet. And don't be intimidated by the number of components and parameters. The transmission line, when you ask a lot of people, most of the time, they either don't understand it, or if they do understand it, they speak about it like it's the gold standard. The transmission line is definitely hard to kind of wrap your head around at times, and fair enough for that. But it definitely is one of the best models for describing real systems because it comes from reality. It actually transmission line is like power lines in a city, or along the highway. It depends on, I guess, where you live in the world. I mean, I assume most countries have this sort of thing, but it's like you have a power line with electricity going through. Like this is a real a real circuit model to describe a real situation, and the way that porous electrodes, operate mimics this in a micro scopic way, right? And so this model is based in reality. It really is. It's not like some models, and even the Warburg to a large extent is like, it's based in reality, but there's a lot of theory to it. It's diffusion. It's, whatever that a lot of people really prefer the transmission line model for this reason, because it's really grounded in something real, and it lends itself to that. So don't be put off by the complexity of it is sort of my advice to you. But I hope that kind of if you have follow-up question, like more, how do I do this or whatever? I mean, in general, I think your question was, is this justified? And the answer is yes, any of those can be justified. You can justify using a Randles element, but I think the most justified model would be the transmission line, especially based on what you've said.
All right. Very good. We have a question from Luke Live for Physics, or Luke Live for Physics, and with a super chat, which is nice, which is why do I see impedance in EIS drop predictably as temperature increases to 50 to 60? When testing hotter, the impedance often rises again versus continuing to drop. This is for commercial 18650 and
I think he's missing a number.
2170 cells.
I think it's 20. Is it 20?
2170.
Oh no, it is. It's a cylindrical.
It's a cylindrical.
I haven't used 2170. 21700. That's what it's more.
2700. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, maybe it's called 2170, but the extra zero, it's an annoying thing because 18650 is it's 1.8. It's a diameter. It's 1.8 centimeters, I think, or 18 millimeters. I think that's right, and it's 65 millimeters long, I believe. And they put a zero. It's like, what? You could just call it 1865. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Anyway, that's your battery gripe for a moment. But
yeah.
I was always, it doesn't need to be 5 digits. It could have been 4. Anyway, whatever. So why do you see the impedance drop? Okay, well, first of all, the impedance drops because batteries do have sort of, let's say sweet spots kinetically, and it's in that range, 40, 50, 60 degrees C. As a general rule, right, there's exceptions like thermodynamically and endothermic reactions, whatever, but most reactions, kinetics will improve at higher temperatures, right? If you're seeing the impedance go up again impedance often rises again as you go hotter. That could be a very bad sign. Batteries can withstand higher temperatures, but you start to get other things happening. So you could have degradation of the anode, degradation of the cathode, degradation of the electrolyte. One of the reasons why your impedance might be going up is because the SEI could be collapsing. If the SEI collapses, you could have all kinds of bad stuff start to happen. You could have degradation. You could have, severe performance losses. All of these things could very well increase the impedance of your system. It kind of points out another fact in a very practical sense, which is that impedance is a very powerful tool for diagnostic of battery state of charge and state of health. And so one of the things that impedance can really point to is when the temperature changes, what is going on in the battery.
It's a bit of a follow-up. I think it's just why does it not continue to drop? Why does impedance not continue to drop? But grows
when it gets hotter than 50 or 60. Yeah, it's everything that I'm saying. I mean, I think that it's probably, unfortunately, certain degradation processes may start to occur, and that leads to higher impedance because now the system is not functioning the way it's supposed to.
There's a chemistry thing happening.
Yeah,
a lot of the times the battery chemistry governs a lot of its operation, and operating temperatures based on what the electrolyte, the ions themselves, the anode cathode materials. I don't know what they are for 18650s and 2170 cells, but
I mean, you've got graphite in the anode, and you probably have NMC or NCA, maybe
mhm,
cobalt oxide, could be iron phosphate.
mhm,
Um, uh, it just seems like probably there's some, you know, undesirable process that's occurring once you start increasing the temperature. Again, it could be SEI, degradation, decomposition, modification could be happening. And if the SEI is compromised in some way, it makes it difficult for instance, ion transfer and subsequent intercalation to be facilitated at the anode if the SEI is compromised. And that can happen as you change temperature, especially as you increase the temperature. If the SEI collapses, you could have some of that problem. And when they're cooled back down, the impedance returns to yeah. I mean, graphite and NCM or NCA. Yeah, yeah. So what you're banking on is when you cool it down, that the things that I described are reversible, and they will be to a certain extent. One of the problems with batteries can be how long can that be a reversible thing. Um, Batteries can often be exposed to elevated temperatures and then cooled back down, and they will return to normal. And then sometimes you can do that a bunch of times, and then all of a sudden they go into thermal runaway because you something you went to an elevated temperature 70 one too many times, or 80 or 100, whatever temperature it was. You went up there one too many times, you caused the SEI to break down, you caused a lithium plating event to occur, you caused a dendrite to form, maybe you caused the separator to partially dissolve or fuse, you created a soft or even a hard short, and then all of a sudden your battery might die. Short circuit, 0 volts, at worst case, a safety feature. Hopefully they have built-in safety features like a PTC or CID, and was it CIP, CID, something like that. And very worst case is the battery itself will experience a catastrophic thermal runaway event. In your case, if you're finding that these things are reversible, it's probably that, like, if the SEI collapses, it can reform. If the elevated temperature causes, for instance, agglomeration of material that reduces the number of active sites at either the anode or the cathode or both, the impedance will go up because there's fewer active sites available. That's like an increase in the entropy, like you talked about, right?
Mhm.
It's like it's gonna make it more difficult to do the electrochemistry at either or both electrode. But as you lower the temperature back down, it breaks up. It reverses itself. It goes back to normal, what it was before. That isn't always going to be the case. I mean, it's the same thing. No matter what you do to a battery, when you kind of abuse it, whether it's high temperature, overcharge, or over discharge, there's a chance that it will return to normal, so to speak. And there's a chance that you might have some or total irreversible loss. So, and if what you're doing is part of a research project, like, it's perfectly reasonable what you're doing. You're testing the limit of the battery. You're testing the, uh, stability at different temperatures. You're testing the how it functions and whatever.
There's another question, I guess, to add on to this. The impedance changes depending on the state of charge, correct?
Yes, it does.
So one question, Luke, to maybe look into or ask is, what is the state of charge when this happens? And does this phenomenon also occur at the same state of charge? So if it's at 80% state of charge, 100% state of charge, 50, 40, 20, do you still get the same behavior? That may also provide a little bit more insight into what might be happening if you don't get that kind of temperature dependence.
Mhm.
It's a bit of I think you could program that experiment. You could automate that experiment if you have a temperature controlled thing. But that's I guess another question that may also help you understand maybe chemically or physically what's happening. Is what's the battery state of charge during those things?
Right. And I mean, it's also possible that if any of those sort of mildly or severely catastrophic things occur, for instance, even a soft short, we talk about soft shorts and hard shorts. A hard short is like if you connect a piece of metal between the anode and the cathode.
Yeah.
It's like the battery immediately just completely discharges, heats up, fire occurs, but whatever. A soft short is like when there's a direct path that can form between the anode and the cathode, but it is maybe temporary or not a direct path. It's almost like it could be like a highly resistive path, but there's a path that you'd call that a soft short. So it's possible at high temperatures you're developing some soft shorts, and so it's partially discharging, and so the state of charge is changing, and then your impedance changes as a result. Yeah, so you take impedance plots every 10%. Yeah, it's pretty standard.
Also at each temperature.
Yeah, I mean, at every temperature you want to, you can see. I mean, honestly, I think what you're doing, and the other part of this is that, everything that I just said is how would I put it? Possible, but also somewhat like, it's propositions for what could be happening. And it's like, I just proposed a lot of things with any and all different parts of the battery that could be occurring. But a lot of this kind of a study is kind of empirical in nature, which is to say, studies of batteries at different states of charge and different temperatures, studies of their impedance are very empirical. It's very much like, it's often done as a way to chart what the impedance is at these different conditions, at these different temperatures, in these different states of charge, so that we can make predictions. So if I have a battery of unknown temperature and unknown state of charge, for instance, I could take an impedance measurement, and based on the tracking of those data, I can say, hey, it looks like my, quick diagnostic of impedance, my battery appears to be at 70% state of charge and 20 C or whatever. Like but it's empirical, right? It's like, it's almost number equals state. And your question is more theoretical, which is, well, why is that impedance that way? And those are good questions. And again, I've tried to lay out some, theories as to why that might be the case. But I think ultimately, to a large degree, it isn't certain, right? It could be any or all of the things that I said. And it's quite difficult, especially with a full battery, because there's so much there. This is why, if you were really trying to get to the bottom of this, what you would probably need to do is do a bunch of individual tests. You would have to construct either cylindrical or coin cells with half cells of everything. So you do the same kind of test with just the graphite anode and a lithium cathode in a coin cell, and see what the graphite anode shows for behavior at different states of charge or intercalation levels at different temperatures, and then create one with the cathode, and then, do a lithium cell and test the separator, test the electrolyte. Like, you could, like this, if you were like really going for some massive parametric study to really dig into like why mechanistically, you would have to do a lot of additional tests to be like, well, nothing changes with the anode impedance wise. Like, I'm just making this up. I have no idea if this is the case. Let's just say you do the anode test, and at like every temperature and state of charge, its impedance is like not or predictably changing. Okay, well, then it's not the anode that's causing, you could conclude, for instance. But you do the cathode and you see that up then down or down then up or whatever, behavior based on temperature. And then so you might say, okay, well, it's something that's causing the impedance to change dramatically appears to be related to the cathode. And then you could theorize why. It's like, oh, well, look at the, different physical properties of like NCM or NCA. You might be able to see like, oh, well, in some cases, a different phase will form at different temperatures. Of these materials. These are, especially with the cathode, it's like NCM is nickel, cobalt, manganese oxide, basically. So it's like you have 3 different transition metals along with lithium and oxygen. So there's a bunch of oxidation states. Maybe an oxidation state changed. Maybe at certain temperatures, some of the manganese leaves the lattice. Again, don't take this as specifically. I'm just providing a possible answer, because these are things that we know do happen as you heat up a composite material, for instance, some of the elements might have a tendency to change crystal structure or phase, or they leave or whatever. Just as one specific example, like for instance, lithium cobalt oxide, when you over discharge it, you're putting lithium into it. And as you continue to put lithium into it, the oxidation state of the cobalt changes. And if it changes too much, it becomes cobalt +2, which is not conductive, and you lose activity. So like, I know I could draw it out. I could kind of get into it more deeply. I'm just trying to point out to you that, like, if something like that happened because of an over discharge state or an overcharge or a higher temperature, you might end up with a phase that's no longer electrochemically active, and therefore your impedance goes up, or whatever. So things like that are possible. But to the point of your full battery system, it's like it's a difficult question to answer without sort of doing a parametric study of each component as to why, which one is contributing to that impedance change and why. But again, mainly what you're venturing into is an empirical study, which is what many people, I did this when I was a postdoc, actually. Specifically, I did empirical studies on impedance diagnostics of batteries. And so this is something I'm pretty familiar with.
All right. Very good. Hussein has a question from LinkedIn. He says, I hope you are doing well. Could you explain the physical meaning of the real and imaginary components of EIS? And what about if the Warburg part is not 45 degrees?
This is like that video you made.
That's right. Yes.
That's exactly it.
It's exactly like the video
perfect.
I made.
I'm going to link it while you explain it.
Sure. Yeah. So, often when I was learning impedance, I was trying to kind of make sense of it, because I came from kind of the DC world where we understand, and I think people can see my screen. Yeah. So,
yes, good.
So basically, the real impedance I think of as V equals IR, and then the resistance, this is Ohm's law, is equal to the voltage divided by the current. And this is what I'm going to say an approximation of Z real. And basically, I think generally speaking, we have a conceptual understanding of what resistance is, which is to say that if I have if I have a battery, I'm just talking about batteries, minus plus, and I connect a resistor to it. Huh?
This is from LinkedIn. I only go to LinkedIn to put it.
Yes.
I was just going to put the comment.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
won't go to LinkedIn. I'll put the, Musin, I'll put the link in a moment in LinkedIn. I just need to get to the, sorry, go ahead, Alex.
And so basically it's just kind of this relationship. I know actually, like, electrical engineers will put the positive terminal and current flows this way, but realistically it actually flows this way. It goes from negative to positive. So, but basically there's a current that flows across, and Ohm's law simply just states that the resistance is equal to this ratio. It's probably the best way to think about it. It's to state that, if I want more current to flow through a given resistor, if the resistance is very large, I need more voltage to drive that current through. Conversely, you can interpret this other ways. You can say, if I want to get, if I have a certain amount of current, if I want to increase the voltage across a resistor, I need less current, or based on what the resistance value is. If I want more V, I would need maybe like less I to get the voltage, up or back and forth, depending on what it is. So it's just this relationship. It's a and physically we can think of it as an interpretation of how easy is it for an electron to move through a circuit. That's all, right? So that's what that's why I would call Z real is. The complication that I have seen and observed is on what Z imaginary is. Right. This is something that I think when you're learning about impedance, ZI is kind of the question mark. What's the physical interpretation based on this kind of picture. So the way I like to think about ZI is that ZI, an imaginary impedance, because in impedance, we're talking about these sine waves, which I don't draw very well, but we have the sine wave, and let's say this is the sine wave of like the voltage. Well, we also have a sine wave of the current. And the impedance for the current, and this is the current, and it's that ratio, right? The impedance as a function of frequency is equal to the frequency dependent voltage divided by the frequency, the frequency dependent current. So in this picture, and so Z real is also just kind of the magnitude of this. But when we want to talk about Z imaginary, or Z double prime, sometimes called, that has to do with the phase shift, right? So I didn't draw it as well, but there is a phase shift, a delay in time between when the applied voltage and the measured current show up. So while the real impedance has to do with the magnitude, right? It has to do with the magnitude of the voltage and the current. The imaginary impedance has everything to do with how delayed in time is the signal that I'm measuring. The frequency is the same, but we get this, and I didn't draw this, as basically as exaggerated. Let's actually, let me select this. Let me just redraw it. I think it might be a little bit easier if I draw it this way. So again, I have this. Not a great sine wave, but it works. And then I have this.
Sharp there.
Yeah, it's a little sharp here. There we go. And the phase angle is like, oh well, these two show up in a different time. They don't show up at the same time. It's delayed in time. So that's what the imaginary impedance physically relates to. I think of it as a time lag or a time delay. Anything, and this has been very helpful for me in terms of thinking about impedance, is that when you think about things in systems, actually, especially in electrochemistry, like for example, when I don't know, when Neil and I were learning about IR compensation, right? Like how a potentiostat compensates for added solution resistance and the IR drop. Well, one thing that we found, which is like, oh, when we're testing this thing, if we actually just used a resistor, if we connected our potentiostat to a resistor, turned the IR compensation on, we would never run into an overcompensation situation, a situation where you get oscillation in the potentiostat when you're doing cyclic voltammetry. No matter what the resistor was, you would not get this overcompensation. And so I'm like, why? Like, why is that not the case? Like, if I'm overcompensating for a resistance, for a resistor, why doesn't the potentiostat go into oscillation? And that's because the only reason oscillation exists is because of time delay. It's because the potentiostat is trying to, it's trying to reach a certain potential based on certain electrical circuits, and there's no time lag if you have a pure resistor. Pure resistance, the impedance of a pure resistor, has no imaginary component, so it never lags in time. The only thing that creates a time lag that could lead to overcompensation and potentiostat oscillation are capacitors. They have a time delay. When you try to run a current through a capacitor, or a voltage through a capacitor, and you try to measure the current, it is delayed in time because that's just the fundamental nature of a capacitor. And so that was actually a big kind of breakthrough moment, is that anytime you see imaginary impedance, that means that what you're dealing with delays the signal in time, not in magnitude, but in time. So that's physically how I think about those two things. And then the last thing, Neil put he put a link in our chat, both in LinkedIn and on YouTube, for a video I made that kind of describes a little bit about Warburg impedance, that you can think about how you can think about Warburg impedance conceptually. And when you do that, when you watch that video, which I recommend you do, you'll be able to kind of conceptualize why you may not get a 45-degree angle. The long story short is that 45 degrees about the origin of a Nyquist plot means that the real and the imaginary impedance grow proportionally at the same rate, right? The frequency, they're both equal to each other. And if you think about the magnitude of something, in the case of Warburg impedance, we're talking about diffusion. We're talking about molecules moving and how hard it is for the molecule to move, and the lag in the time response. You end up thinking about the Warburg impedance and its 45-degree angle as the speed with which a molecule is moving, whether that's through a membrane or just in a semi-infinite, just solution phase. You get this 45-degree angle. So deviations from the 45-degree angle mean or give you information about maybe my system is taking more time for charge to transfer, or it's taking less time for charge to transfer given the frequency or the time scale of my EIS experiment. So every point on an EIS on a Nyquist plot represents a time, right? It's a frequency. So at very slow frequencies, when you give a system a lot of time, well, in principle, the process that's occurring, if it's kind of like at very, very low frequencies, you only get real impedance. It means that the time that it was supposed to take that molecule to pass along charge, because it's current and voltage, it had more than enough time to do it. So it was never delayed in time. It had the time to pass the charge back and forth. So that's kind of the TLDR for a video. So you don't even have to read, just have to listen. But I would recommend watching those videos too. And of course, Machine, if you have more questions or you watch the video and you're like, I'm still confused, Alex, that didn't make any sense. Let me know what you may have had, issues understanding or learning. But hopefully that helps answer your question.
Yeah, I think somewhat more to that point, or just redundancy to a certain extent, I suppose. But one of the things to think about that last point you're making about the time and the speed at which things are moving, I guess, is that a 45-degree angle is diffusion, right? It's like a plane of ions, you think, moving at some speed. That's what the diffusion coefficient is in terms of units. It's like centimeters squared per second, right? That's an area plane per time. So it's an aerial speed, area speed sort of, right? It's like plane is moving at centimeters squared per second. That's 45-degree angle. That's like what it is. A 90-degree angle. So that's a 45-degree angle on the Nyquist plot. A 90-degree angle is a perfect capacitor, which is like two planes at some distance from each other, not moving at all, zero movement. So 45 degrees, it's moving. 90 degrees, it's not moving at all. So one way to, just as a very simple thought concept, is that any angle between 45 and 90 degrees is something between moving at a normal diffusion speed and not moving. It's like moving but more slowly. So something like that, like non-ideal diffusion or like slower diffusion, mostly capacitive, but the ions are moving. Like there's ways to think about this and interpret this. And I'm not saying what's right necessarily or wrong, but that's one way to kind of conceptualize what that might mean. And that's actually quite common, is that we don't always get exactly 45 degrees. We get, 70 degrees, or we get an alpha of 0.9 or 0.57. It's not 0.5, you know, whatever it is. And that's kind of ways to interpret that or think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then of course there's also like Warburg open, Warburg short,
Yeah,
all those types of things. You get into that. And this way of thinking also helps you rationalize those kinds of situations where you have like
when it's going
barriers.
through a boundary of a fixed length, basically. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so yeah, comment if you want any sort of follow-up on that. But PW did have one follow-up as well. It says a follow-up question: what if I know that the electrodes in my system are porous, but the spectrum looks more like classical Randles? Is it simpler? Is a simpler fit better in that case? Most probably yes. If you have porous electrodes, but you're not observing porous behavior, it could be a bad idea, or let me just, maybe not a bad idea. It could be, let's just say, not helpful to fit a transmission line. Like, for example, in that case, if you have no like 45-degree line at high frequency, you don't have that kind of characteristic porous behavior. And it could be for a variety of reasons, right? It could be that the pores aren't wetted properly. Your pores are too small, right? The surface tension's too high. And so the you know, like think about it like this, right? Let's see, just draw some stuff in my, hang on one second. Create another slide so I can draw some things. Where is it? There it is. I got it. Okay. So like if you have your porous electrode, right? And you have your porous electrode, or whatever the situation is, and you have your electrolyte and it enters all the pores, right? And then you get your impedance spectrum, and it's your nice, you know, transmission line with this 45-degree feature here, right? Think about what would happen if, for instance, either because the properties of your electrolyte change, or maybe your pores are like really thin. You know, I'm just thinking about some possibility here, right? Well, in this case, it might not be possible, you know, for your electrolyte to penetrate those pores. So it's like you just have electrolyte here, and it's effectively like a planar electrode. So it's like if you're trying to apply your transmission line, well, sad face, there's no actual electrolyte in this pore. And so it's kind of like saying there's infinite resistance here. So you might as well not have it. So like you could fit the transmission line, and what you're going to get is either all open or infinity resistance. Like you could get values, but it's kind of analogous to something like this. This is another sort of a thing, right? It's like one interpretation of a spectrum that looks like this, whether this is 45 degrees or not, is you can have a leading resistor and, you know, let's just say a resistor, capacitor, and a Warburg element, right? Or whatever. So that's one interpretation. Another is that you could have this be two RC elements, right? And two RC elements, like this corresponds to this semicircle, and then this one corresponds to this second one. And it's like, well, it would be a semicircle if I just went way, 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 way out here. And so it's like this resistor is effectively infinity. So it's like, okay, well, I could like do this and I'll get like, you know, this, if this is like R2, I'll get like R2 equals, you know, 10 to the 90 ohms. It's like, well, what's the point? Like, it doesn't even matter, right? It's like, it's so big, you might as well not fit it. So what I'm saying is that if you fit the transmission line in this case, what you might end up finding is that, okay, well, I get a fit, but like some of my components are 0 or infinity or whatever. So it's like, you might as well not bother. And so just, that was kind of a longer winded way of answering your question, but if you're not observing that behavior, it could be because of what I described. The pores aren't really being filled with electrolyte, or there's some other reason. But in that case, probably it is better to have a simpler fit. This impedance fitting is always a two-pronged approach. It's what Alex mentioned, before when you started talking about this, which is it's really the combination of your knowledge of what's happening, which in this case would lead you to think transmission line, coupled with what the data actually looks like, which in some cases can drive you to say, well, maybe it's not, what's the best combination of what I know like from the phenomena and the morphology is happening and what the data actually physically looks like, because sometimes what the data actually looks like informs the morphology or informs the phenomena that are occurring, and vice versa. So you want to try to get the best combination as a intelligent scientist as you can of those two things, and then figure out what makes the most sense, I guess. So I think you're thinking the right way, and in that case, yeah, the simple model would be probably the wisest choice.
We have a question from Samir Ali. In a galvanic cell, why do we take anode and cathode in reverse nature, like cathode positive and anode negative? So I guess this is I don't know if this is a sign convention type of issue, or like why do we assign one thing? Because
it's a thermodynamics thing.
It's a thermodynamics thing.
Or maybe what I say is a Nernst equation thing.
It's a Nernst equation thing.
Like,
now you're talking about the Nernst equation.
I know. I don't know that I'm qualified. I mean, I think I'm gonna have to leave it to you. Yeah. But the reality is it's
I almost think it's an electricity convention, because they always say like, oh, the positive is where the electrons come from, but that's not really it. And
yeah,
they put things there, but
so some of it's definitely convention. So for instance, a galvanic cell is a cell that's spontaneous, right?
Yeah.
Which means that it will on its own deliver energy for you. And by on its own, basically, it's like it naturally provides an energy because of chemistry, like
a battery. I
mean, like a battery or a fuel cell. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reason that it does it is because like once in very broad general terms, one side chemically and electrochemically, but whatever, really wants to give up an electron, and the other side really wants to get an electron. Like energetically, it's favorable. That's just what happens. That's a redox reaction. Okay, so in a galvanic cell, in a fuel cell, for instance, the cathode is where the oxygen reduction reaction is occurring, and it's like the oxygen really wants like to get electrons to reduce, and on the anode side, it really wants to give up electrons. Like hydrogen really wants to it's dying to give up electrons. It's begging someone to take them, and the other side's like, I'll take them. So energetically, it's favored, right? And so So I'm just trying to think like there's a better like.
Well, haven't you also said like haven't you also said like for a battery? First off, there's I think a bajillion ways to rationalize this, but like when a battery is fully charged, like if you have a lithium-ion battery that's fully charged, that means that the anode, which is typically graphite, is full of lithium.
Correct.
Right. So it's full of lithium. Okay.
The cathode is devoid of.
And lithium. The cathode is devoid of lithium.
Yes.
Lithium, of course, contains the positive charge, but it's but the electron is there, right? Like an oxidation reaction has to occur. So and then the negative, the electron escapes from the anode. So the negatively charged electron, upon discharge, goes through the anode all the way through the circuit, the load, and then combines to the cathode, which is positively charged because that's going to accept the electrons. So you can think of it that way. It's like, the electrons come from the
I
anode
can draw that
during
too.
the discharge cycle,
Yes.
and they go to the positive cathode.
Some of it is convention.
Yeah, I
Right.
think
So there's some of
a
it,
lot
but
that's
that's a good way to
convention.
think about it too. So by convention, with a galvanic cell, we just like we have to pick one to be one and one to be the other to a
Yeah.
certain extent.
Yes. Yeah.
And so the way we define things is that the cathode is the side that is reducing during discharge. The anode is the side that is oxidizing during discharge.
Mhm.
Or during in a fuel cell, it's not discharge, it's when it's delivering energy.
Yeah,
But
it's
it's the same
delivering
concept.
energy,
When,
yeah.
when the thing is giving you energy, because it's a spontaneous process, that
Yeah.
when a galvanic cell, battery, fuel cell, or otherwise, is giving you energy, definitionally, the cathode is the side that is undergoing a reduction reaction. And you can think
Yes.
about that because it's plus, it attracts electrons. So
Yeah.
just like Alex said, here's the cathode, right? And this is you can think about it as plus, and here's the anode, and this is negative. So during discharge, this is my cell phone. Isn't that what an iPhone looks like? Right?
One button with
Yeah, it has one button and it's terrible. I hate iPhones. So I'm a non-Apple person. Fight me. Okay. So this is your circuit, right? This is your battery that's making your iPhone let you play Candy Crush or whatever you're doing. During discharge, this has like lithium, whatever, carbon, graphite, and this side has let's just make it simple, cobalt oxide, right? NCA is too many letters.
Yeah, too many.
Okay. Okay. So this is our cathode, right? All the lithium is on this side. There's no lithium on this side. This is 100% state of charge, right? Now, during discharge, the lithium breaks apart into lithium plus and electrons. The electrons are going to go this direction because negative is going to be repelled by negative. So this side is negatively charged. It's the negative. So the electrons are going to go this direction towards the positive. The negatives are going to go towards the positive. And there's a balancing in charge because electrochemistry doesn't work if there's no balance of charge. The lithium plus goes across the membrane and then combines, and this becomes LiCiO2, right? So it starts to intercalate in that side. But that's the way you can think about that convention. Is the cathode is the positive side. It attracts the electrons through the circuit, and they build up on this side until it's fully discharged. Then you have to put energy back in to charge it. So something like that. I mean, the other answers to that really are just it's just a calculation thing. Like if you flip it, you're like, why is it this way? If you flip it, you just get a negative voltage. Like if you like, the what I didn't show you in this diagram is that the voltage or the potential, if you will, of the cathode is somewhere between, let's just say 3.5 and 5 volts versus lithium plus. The potential of the anode is somewhere between 0 and 1. So when you subtract those two, you either get positive 3.5 to 4 volts or negative 3.5 to 4 volts, right? Just like 1 minus 4 is negative 3. 4 minus 1 is positive 3. So to a certain extent, part of the answer is it's better, like positive voltage matches up with spontaneous energy. So we put the cathode minus the anode gives me positive 3, 3.5, 4 volts, whatever the numbers are. And it works that way.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, and Zamir actually says, thanks. This is for his class 12 from India. So I don't know. Well, truth is that we don't know if that's the right answer, but that's a way to rationalize why one's positive, one's negative, and yet in electrolytic chemistry we say like, oh, cathodes always do the reduction reaction, anodes do the oxidation reaction. Well, they do, but that's the electron or the thing going into solution that leaves that there's charge on the actual solid anode or cathode device itself that changes. So
well, a lot of the real answer from a theory perspective is related to kind of what I just said. It's a spontaneity thing. Like positive voltage correlates with negative Gibbs free energy, which is spontaneous process.
Yeah.
So like these are the like boring answers, the theory answers.
Yeah.
But it's like definitionally, a galvanic process has a negative Gibbs free energy. That's just
Mhm.
definitional, which means it's spontaneous.
Mhm.
And because delta G is minus NFE, delta G and potential or voltage are inversely related. So a positive voltage correlates to a spontaneous process, hence
Yeah.
why the galvanic process has a positive voltage. And then, as I said, the potentials of each of these things in your galvanic cell have
yeah.
to have a positive voltage to be spontaneous. So 4 minus 1 is a positive 3. It means it's spontaneous. If I were to propose that it goes the other way, I get a negative 3. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. And that suggests that it's not a spontaneous process. But we know that it is a spontaneous process based on what I described and just based on observation and based on knowledge of electrochemistry and potentials and redox processes. So when we look at it, we can say the positive voltage is this one to this one. So I know which side is my cathode, which side is my anode, and which is the proper order of subtracting. So that's the other way to think about it. It's again, it's more boring in some sense. It's a definitional thing that a positive voltage correlates with a galvanic cell.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay.
12th grade. Yeah, you are a
12th grade.
senior. We call that in America. We call
Yeah.
that a senior in high
Senior
school.
in high
I'm
school.
not sure if Indian high school uses the same like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior terminology.
Yeah, that's a good
necessarily.
question.
It's definitely an American thing.
Yeah. Making things more confusing.
Right. Because why would we use anything that's makes sense, or the metric system or anything else? It's like
What was it? There's a Saturday Night Live comedy sketch where it's like, what is the first year that our children will go into school? Kindergarten. And what will the second year be called?
first grade.
First grade. Which I always thought, I was like, oh, yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, second year is first grade.
First year.
Yeah, I think that was a funny one. That's like the yeah. They did a whole thing for the high school ones too. I forget. Yeah, like a joke on why they use those words. It doesn't make any sense or whatever.
Oh God, yeah.
It's funny.
All right, we have a question. Question that just came in. Someone probably from South Korea. How much do you think mass transfer affect a electroreduction reaction? In what way? I think I need a little bit more clarification, but generally speaking, in techniques like cyclic voltammetry and in what we would call traditional 3-electrode cells, mass transport plays a massive role. It's a very important concept in electrochemistry for understanding just about anything that occurs. So to spend a little bit of time just kind of visualizing or describing it. If you think about an electrode, and this can be from a battery, this can be a solid, just a solid electrode in electroanalytical chemistry. So if you have this electrode, and you have a solution, right? I'm just gonna put the solution, in solution, some kind of electrolyte. I have described in the past when you have voltage differences, between the quote solution and the kind of phi s phi m. You get this tiny, kind of this very sharp change in the potential between these, and this distance, this kind of effective distance, because this is like the basically the double layer, the outer Helmholtz plane. This distance is about 2 nanometers max. So only molecules. So the point of this is only a molecule that's within this distance, within this range. That's the only place where they will feel the electron transfer. Only place that will happen. Electron transfer only occurs at the interface. It does not occur over here. Only occurs here. So when you ask the question, how important is mass transport? It's like, well, it's very important, because how do you get these molecules over here? And there's several modes of mass transport that we define, kind of what's called the Nernst-Planck relationship. So the flux of molecules, which is just how many molecules within a given space X, how you get there? They can get there by these mechanisms: diffusion, migration, and convection. So the only way that we're able to get any electricity or any electron transfer to occur is via these mechanisms. So studying mass transport or controlling mass transport is very important, and plays a huge role in electrochemistry and the electrochemical response in general. This is one reason why electrode rotators are super important. Electrode rotators are powerful tools because in a rotating disc electrode or a rotating ring disc electrode, you have the ability to control the diffusion layer thickness and control the mass transport. Most of the time, we're kind of at the whim of just diffusion or things that we really can't control. Like a rotator has a knob that literally can help you get more molecules to the surface faster in a controlled manner. There's almost no other technique that can help you do that, except for jet impingement, but they kind of do the same thing. So so hopefully that kind of helps answer your question a little bit. Please continue to ask questions if you want further clarification. But do you think mass transfer is very important, or how it affects electroreduction reaction? Absolutely. Like, all your data is going to be based on mass transport, or heavily depend on mass transport.
It looks like Ahmed has a question, put it in LinkedIn and YouTube, so we got both of them. So
okay.
No worries about that. It looks, but yeah, thanks for sort of just covering all your bases. Make sure that that we get you. And the question is, can you please explain what is the physical meaning for an increase in the Catholic current associated with the SCI and CV? And then it says, this last part, you say upon adding certain additives, whether it's beneficial or detrimental. So I assume first of all, I assume what you're asking is, are additives beneficial or detrimental? Or if you're just asking if the current associated with the SEI is beneficial or detrimental. I can kind of address both. But mainly the thing that I want to point out is that I am also a fan of Catholic current. So just so everybody's aware, this is Catholic current. Okay. I assume you mean cathodic current, but I just wanted to put a picture of the Pope holding a battery. So that was my excuse. But anyway, to answer your question, all dad jokes aside, the first way I'll answer this is I'm not 100% sure what you mean by the last bit here. The physical meaning for the increase in the cathodic current during SEI charging, and so just for reference, it's like if you have a charge discharge curve, so you might have let's just say capacity here, okay, versus voltage. Your first, so this would be like first scan, and then you might have like 10 through 100th scan. And so your first scan might be like something like this or whatever. I'll just draw discharge curves just to make it so it's not too much stuff. And then like the normal ones might be like that. And it's like your very first one, you have like all this extra capacity, which correlates to more current. So this is kind of the point, right? What is the physical meaning? So it's actually the formation of the SEI. So it's mainly at the anode, but what you have is, you can think about the anode here is basically graphite, and you have let's just say this is carbon, like C6. Okay. And you have your electrolyte, let's just say it's like something like LiPF6 electrolyte here in carbonates. So there's usually a bunch of carbonates here. The current is actually a the formation of the SEI. So the SEI that forms on the surface, this is where it's tricky. It's a variety of things. It could be carbonates, like various carbonates. It's oxalates. I don't know the formula very well for oxalates. It's you'll see pictures you could find online. Like nobody's 100% sure. People have done some imaging. There's been some in situ, ex situ sort of studies on it. Sometimes people will draw like various, like they'll make it look like a like a crater almost, and there's like, oh, there's this this pocket, this material, and it's like various decomposition products. But the point is, it forms and then it becomes a stable layer on the anode. And what it does is it sort of facilitates future Li plus diffusion in and out of the anode specifically. But its formation is also an electrochemical process. So the formation of the SEI is generally, you could think about it as a reduction of some parts of the electrolyte, whether it's the PF6 or it's like ethylene. Again, I don't know how to draw. I'm not sure I could draw ethyl methyl carbonate very quickly, ethylene carbonate, but you have these, carbonate, whatever, electrolytes. And so these are getting, reduced, plus electron gives you some part of the SEI. Like that's a reaction that's happening. And so that just takes some current to do that reduction process. So the answer is the extra current is, yes, it's useful. And it happens because it's the formation of the SEI involves electrochemical processes. Now, to the last part of your question is about if what you're asking is like, do additives benefit or are they detrimental? That is a tricky question. I think I'm not like really well familiar with additives in their exactly their purposes and how well they do or don't do whatever. I think that people look at different additives to cause the SEI to be thinner or thicker or things like that. I mean, as a general rule, I would say people add different additives to try to make things more beneficial. Now, in what way is that beneficial? Right? There's probably ways to interpret that. For instance, if it makes the SEI thinner, but just as effective, that could be better because it could reduce the diffusional path. It could reduce the impedance of the battery. It could make it perform better. A super thick SEI could collapse, can also result in secondary storage, which can be unstable. So there's reasons why you might want to manipulate the thickness of the SEI, and different additives probably have an effect on that in ways that I can't easily describe. It's probably things like the additive, as part of that reduction process where the SEI forms, produces more of this species of reduction product, and that results in a different thickness of the SEI. I would have to read more literature to know the specifics about which additive does which thing and all of that. But as a general rule, I would say, yeah, people are trying to create more beneficial in various ways, electrolyte / SEI formation by adding or adjusting the composition of the electrolyte. And then hopefully that kind of answers the question just about what that cathodic current is. It's actually just the decomposition of the electrolyte itself to form the SEI. That's why you get a very large irreversible first charge discharge cycle, basically. When you charge up your battery, the very first one, if you put together a fresh battery, will have a very large irreversible capacity initially, and it's just because the SEI is formed. And then it's then it'll have regular behavior, so to speak.
I don't know if he sent a kind of, a follow-up. He said small clarification. I don't know if you already talked about this.
Okay.
Sorry, just small clarification. My question regarding Li copper coin cell and conduction of CV for blank electrolyte and additive to improve the oxidation resistance via monitoring cyclophotomegram. I don't know if that seems very different than what he just asked.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Um,
So first of all, if you have a lithium copper coin cell, you're probably looking at diffusional process. There's no intercalation going on here. Copper is the current collector. It won't intercalate lithium. Maybe it plates it, but it probably doesn't do very much. So you're adding, let me see. I'm just going to read that. I see you just put another comment. Let me just read through this and think regarding conduction of CV for blank electrolyte and additive to improve the oxidation resistance. Okay. Is it possible for a metal ion reduction plating peak? Must be negative potential or under certain circumstances can be above 0. So above, so if you're looking at versus Li plus, everything is pretty much above 0. I wouldn't expect a negative potential versus lithium plus if the lithium is your counter electrode in this case. Everything should be above 0. Almost always. I wouldn't expect a negative potential very often versus Li plus. Li plus has a -3 volt standard potential, and so when you subtract that, you get positive. And so the graphite reaction, for instance, occurs. I know you don't have graphite. This is copper coin cell, but just as a basis of comparison here is that the graphite reaction occurs at like 0.1 versus Li plus, and that's about as low as it goes. Metal ion reduction plating peak must be in negative potential. Yeah, I think I might have to see some data to kind of know precisely what you're talking about, and maybe I'd have to see some data for like a lithium copper system because this isn't exactly a lithium ion battery, right? It's some kind of half cell where you're studying some oxidation resistance, as you said, additive to improve the oxidation resistance. I mean, I would also probably assume that something like impedance would be better to study the oxidation resistance than cyclic voltammetry. Cyclic voltammetry, to your last question, is probably more useful for figuring out where the peak might be. If what I said is true, or I'm not thinking about this properly, and maybe it does happen at negative potential for whatever situation you're in here. CV is going to be good for determining where that potential will occur, finding that peak, and then maybe pinpointing the potential at which something will happen in your system. If you're trying to learn about the resistance, it's probably better to do something like impedance, because you can easily measure a resistance from impedance measurements directly without an additive, for instance. So I would assume impedance would be a better method for that. But to a certain extent, I might have to see data to kind of understand what you're referring to here, because I'm not sure I know perfectly well enough, unfortunately, exactly what your system you're referring to. So I might have to kind of leave it there for now. Feel free to give me more context if you want, Ahmed. I've done the best I could with the data that you gave me.
All right. DigVJ is asking a question from X.
Boy,
this is like the first question from X in like
a year,
maybe
a year.
Which is, why do researchers often perform partial compensation, like 80 or 85%, for uncompensated resistance using a potentiostat? Why not 100%? So to a degree, in some cases, you can get away with using 100%. And I think the reason why researchers just perform this partial thing is because they don't fully understand IR compensation, what's actually happening, and the impact that it has in terms of the accuracy of the measurements that they're making. To a certain extent, you will get oscillation and potentiostat ringing when you completely compensate, or overcompensate is really the thing. Because there's also levels of like accuracy, like, okay, how accurately did you determine the resistance value? Does the resistance value change? If you accidentally overcompensate, there may be situations where you'll get potentiostat ringing and the whole experiment goes kind of crazy. So I think this is because people just publish this in the literature, and other people simply try to reproduce what's done in the literature without fully understanding how IR compensation and solution resistance work in electrochemistry. So that's the why. Like, why do researchers perform it? Whether it's good or not, I say no, it's not very good. We don't have too much time, but there was a question. Of course, if you want us to explain this or elaborate this in more detail, we can do that. But there's another question I wanted to get to that we can talk about, because this guy's asking, what advantages and disadvantages do we get with the different rotators, or I would say different rotator configurations for RDE, RCE, RRDE, etc., and how to decide which one will be better for your research. So, I think one thing to kind of mention just right off the bat is that RCE is a rotating cylinder electrode, and rotating cylinder electrodes are primarily used to simulate turbulent, electrochemistry under turbulent conditions. It's highly used in the corrosion industry because there's things like brine water that flows through pipes. And so you would use an RCE if you were, say, studying corrosion and wanted to perform electrochemistry under turbulent conditions where you want to apply certain degrees of shear force, shear stress to your electrode and see what happens to the electrochemistry there. RDE, rotating disc electrode, and RRDE, rotating ring disc electrodes, are kind of similar, analogous kinds of electrochemistry experiments. They're used primarily by electroanalytical chemists, mostly by people studying fuel cell reactions like the oxygen reduction reaction, the oxygen evolution reaction, the hydrogen evolution reaction. And so the RDE is very useful in general because of its ability to control mass transport, or to adjust mass transport in a controllable way. And you have the ability to calculate things like heterogeneous rate constants and diffusion coefficients with quite a bit of accuracy. That's probably one of the main advantages of using the rotating disc electrode, is for catalysis screening and to determine how many electrons are being transferred. The rotating ring disc electrode builds upon that concept by having a concentric ring around your disc electrode. And this is really, really invaluable if you're studying the oxygen reduction reaction. It's almost critical that you have a rotating ring disc electrode if you're studying the oxygen reduction reaction, because it might take me a little bit of time to find this, but there are, if you look at, I did this a while ago, and I should have all my, let's see.
Don't worry, it took me like 45 minutes to find a couple of webinars. You're fine.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember, like, oh, I gave a talk on RRDE. Here we go. So let me just share this. So in the rotating disc electrode, when you have a rotating ring disc electrode, which is here, rotating ring disc electrode.
Let me hide the question. There we go.
You often, the kind of practical application is that, you generate something at the disc. It can then be detected across the ring, and you can determine things like these kind of collection efficiencies for a molecule that's generated at the disc and then detected at the ring. This is highly useful for proton exchange membranes, specifically looking at the two different cases for the oxygen reduction reaction. You can either have the 4-electron transfer process of oxygen going into water, or the 2-electron transfer process of oxygen going into peroxide. If you're generating peroxide, the peroxide can be detected at the ring, because if we have a platinum ring and some fraction of peroxide that's being generated here moves across it, you can bias the ring at a positive potential to oxidize the peroxide back to oxygen and electrons. And this is a great way of determining, hey, if I made a catalyst for the oxygen reduction reaction, how efficient is that catalyst? So that is really the application of the rotating ring disc electrode. So hopefully that helps you with understanding which version. And luckily, once you buy a rotator, switching between the three is actually not that difficult. It's maybe a small cost in terms of like an add-on or two. The rotator itself enables you to perform any of these three experiments. So hopefully that's helpful.
I'm slowly getting taken over by the light coming in.
I know we gotta.
behind me.
Well, luckily we're done, and I'll need to fix this in the future.
Yeah, I think it's just that it's a time of year where the
Time of
sun
year.
is at this time,
Yes,
you
that's
know, of
corrosion.
day, and it's all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, getting it. Oh, it's this direction. I got to go this way to stay alive. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe we'll answer this last question and then, or at least talk about this last
Yes.
question here. I think
From
DVJ had one follow up to
Mhm.
the oscillation thing. Potentiostat oscillation is mostly the given reason, but what does it mean
What does it
is not
mean?
clear. Would love to know your thoughts on physical aspect of resistance by potentiostat.
Mhm.
Well, why the potentiostat oscillates? Is that what you're asking, or what
Yeah.
it has to do? Because there's two parts of this,
Mhm.
right? There's the IR compensation part,
Yeah.
electrochemically, what it means, why it occurs, why you do it, and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And then there's the potentiostat side. The potentiostat is ringing, is oscillating.
Yeah.
So which of those are you most confused about or want more of an explanation about, the electrochemistry side or why the potentiostat does what it does? Because those are slightly different, related, but
slightly different.
one is more about potentiostat operation and construction. The other is about electrochemistry of the system, right? Those are just a little bit different situations, right? In short, the electrochemistry side is a bit easier because it's like whether you compensate for 80%, 90%, or 100%. Potentiostat side.
Potentiostat side.
Whether you compensate for 80, 90, or 100%, your results will be pretty similar because you know you're compensating your results. The numerically the value will be close, like similar. But yeah, he's asking about why the potentiostat rings.
Potentiostat rings.
If you want to pull up something, I just want to touch on this really quick. PW had a follow-up question, and I think and he clarified. He said higher, so I'll substitute lower for higher in your question. But he said the open circuit potential of an anode in a fuel cell fueled by an organic compound like methanol or ethanol is significantly higher than the standard potential for oxidation. Why is that? So the first answer that I have is check what's your reference. So it sounds like this is an anode you're studying in a separate system, but you said in a fuel cell. So if you're in a fuel cell, do you have a reference electrode? Are you measuring the potential of the anode by itself, or are you, because if you're measuring the potential in a fuel cell, it's like a voltage between cathode and anode. So that's my first question, is like what's the potential you're measuring? And then secondly, if it's like an anode independently measured or separately measured or whatever, I would agree in some sense. It doesn't make it's not logical if you were to have an open circuit measurement higher than the potential of the oxidation of an organic compound, because that's the oxidation reaction that's probably going to occur. And so logically, the potential that it sits at would be lower than that, because you need to raise the potential of the anode to induce that oxidation reaction. Like, that logically makes sense to me. And all I can think to say is that perhaps check the reference. You might think it's higher, but you didn't adjust for pH, or you didn't adjust for the reference electrode versus RHE, whatever. Check those, measure the voltage of the cell. Yeah. So the voltage of the cell tells you nothing about what the potential of the anode is. It tells you what the voltage of the cell is. That's the difference between the cathode and the anode. So you have no way to know what the potential of the anode itself is independently, unless you have a reference, or you're doing a half cell reaction in an RDE, in a rotator, in a 3 electrode system. The voltage of the cell is simply the potential or the voltage of the cathode minus the potential of the voltage of the anode. Those can both be absolutely anywhere. So what you think you're measuring as the potential of the anode is not so. That's the voltage of the cell. So check on that, because you might be mistaken. Perhaps the potential of the anode is logically somewhere you would expect it to be. But you can't really tell that by the voltage of the cell. That's just a straight difference between two sides. And it's not with respect to, a standard potential. So go ahead if you want to talk about the potentiostat. This could be the last
maybe the last thing for now.
Yeah.
Potentiostat side. So basically I just found It's one of my slides that talks about it. So this is, I just drew this. This is what you would get with a normal CV, with a degree of IR compensation. When you overcompensate, you tend to get something like this. And it's always messy. This is what we would call kind of like oscillation. The potentiostat is having a very hard time trying to get the correct potential and current, and you end up getting these very, very obscure and weird results that are meaningless, that don't happen. So this is a potentiostat circuit, or a simplified potentiostat circuit. It's actually even very heavily simplified. And I'd recommend either watching one of the YouTube videos about how potentiostat works on our YouTube channel, or similarly, Neil has a whole webinar on potentiostat operation and IR compensation for more detail.
I'll link to those videos now, just so you know. I'll put a few links.
But the short answer is you set the potential here. That's when you're applying your CV, your EIS, you're just kind of step potential. All the different types of waveforms come from your potentiostat set form, reference to ground. This is your electrochemical cell, your counter electrode reference, working and working sense electrodes are all here. And what happens is the signal that you apply gets inverted, and then it's measured. It's pushed out the counter electrode. Your reference versus working sense electrode is connected to this electrometer that literally just looks at the difference between these two potentials, and it's fed back into what's called this high gain operational amplifier. The potentiostat is designed in such a way that these two guys need to be equal to one another for the potentiostat to kind of not do anything. Basically, this is how we set the potential. We say +1 volt comes from here. That's what we tell it to do. And until these two guys, reference and working, are +1 volt, we have +1 volt and +1 volt. They're equal to each other. The potentiostat maintains the potential that we set between the working and reference electrode. When we have IR compensation, what happens is we take the current is measured here at this working drive electrode, and the measured current is then multiplied, it's scaled by this multiplier by basically the resistance. It's the resistance times the current to give us a voltage. And that voltage is added. It gets added to this place here called the summing point. So at any given time, when you have IR compensation turned on, you have an extra voltage. You have voltage from the potentiostatic set point, and you have voltage from the multiplier getting added here and then fed into this inverting input. So as odd as it may seem, you're just like, well, but then that means that this guy ultimately has to change. And there's some truth to that, but that's mostly because the actual potential that you're measuring is incorrect. So we have to compensate for it. Now, the oscillation comes from, if you have a normal system, I use this when just as kind of an example, but when you have 300 ohms of solution resistance, let's say you're applying 1 volt, you get 1 milliamp of current. If you were to change this resistance to something higher, like 400 ohms, and you're overcompensating, you've all of a sudden, and this makes a lot more sense if you listen to like the whole lecture that Neil and I give. But the idea here is what we're doing is we model we model the electrode interface as a resistor and a capacitor in parallel, and we have this RU that we're taking care of, that we're trying to compensate for, because this circuit here represents the electrode interface. This is what we want to apply a potential to. So when you apply a potential that's higher than the one that you told the potentiostat to apply, you get a kind of disconnect. There's a couple things that end up happening. You get this case where you told the potentiostat one thing, and it ends up not being that value. And because it's not that value, the potentiostat tries to correct itself. Now, this is all happening like very quickly. Like all these electronics are moving at a speed, a specific pace, to help keep up with the voltage that you're trying to tell. Like when you're doing a CV sweep, you know, this is potential and this is time. There's a, you know, if this rate is very, very fast, the potentiostat needs to be able to catch up to it. And if it overshoots, it needs to then undershoot. And if it undershoots, it might undershoot too much and then it overshoots. And you see, I'm oscillating because the potentiostat keeps overshooting and undershooting the desired potential that you want the system to be at. And when you overcompensate, there's a lot more kind of advanced electronics that I just can't explain that just describe why that happens. A lot of it has to do with the fact that you have a capacitor. There's a capacitor here, which changes the rate at with which the potential of the working electrode is reached. So this plays a role. The feedback circuit of this guy plays a role. And I didn't draw this because usually this is already very complicated, but in a potentiostat circuit, there's also what's called a stability filter, which is a capacitor at this op amp here. This controls the rate at with which how fast does this op amp adjust the potential that we don't talk about. So I don't know if he mentioned anything, but like this is. It gets really complicated, but there's an interplay, if you will, between there's an interplay between this. Wait, why am I? Between this guy, between the electrical double layer, this guy of our circuit, and then an interplay between the feedback loop here at the summing point. There's an interplay between these three things that has to that ultimately determines whether the potentiostat oscillates. So that's kind of the shortest answer I can give you yeah. without really taking the time to explain the potentiostat circuit with time, so you know what what's this guy, what's this guy. Well, Alex, what's this guy? Well, I can't explain oscillation easily, but if you think about kind of an example is like when you use a microphone. I haven't experienced this because I don't do a lot of music stuff, but like, have you ever had like feedback in a microphone? When you say something and then the speakers kind of catch it and it like echoes and it gets like louder. That whole process is overcompensation and it's causing oscillation. You hear the sound waves oscillate, and it's because these different feedback loop mechanisms have somehow overlapped on one another, and it amplifies the signal, and then it decays. So yeah, okay. So Vijay, I'm glad that you liked it. Yeah, check out those videos. Those videos will help. That'll give you a very clear explanation of things, and then it'll hopefully begin to answer some questions about. Then you can understand the overcompensation part a bit better.
Yeah, it's a complicated thing, and it's, to be honest, something that like you and I have learned about here talking with our electrical engineers, and like it still kind of confuses me to a certain extent, and it's a tricky kind of a thing. So if you look through some of these videos and you're still kind of like, it's a lot, I'm not sure I totally understand how a potentiostat works, welcome to the club.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the best I can tell you. But for now, I think we'll leave it there.
Yes.
Thank you everybody again for great questions for a couple hours here. We should be back next week. We have a couple of weeks. I'll be out the first week of February, most probably. But we have a couple more weeks here where we can continue saying Happy New Year and answering your questions about electrochemistry. So thank you, everybody. I hope everybody has a great weekend, rest of your week next week, and we'll see everybody next Friday.
All right. Bye.
Bye now.